All right, welcome to our next lesson. As you can hear, our dust collection system is on, so it's a little bit louder. Hopefully you can hear me over the noise of the vacuum. But this is the jointer, and the jointer allows us to take our rough stock that we have just cut down from the radial arm saw and allows us to square up one edge. And what I mean by square is if you take a look at a board and you just place it, so I have a piece of pallet wood here, and you place it on a flat table, and if you can see any light underneath it, like there, right, that means that it is not completely flat, right? It's not completely straight. So we need to create a straight, at least one straight edge in order to move on to the next machine. So our objective here is to take a board that's out of square, 90 degrees, right? And square it up and turn it into something usable. So this board's pretty beat up. Obviously, it's a piece of scrap wood that I'm gonna go ahead and run through our machines today. And hopefully at the end, we'll have a square board, right? And the basics of squaring a board, or of the board squaring procedure, is something that you'll use every day while you're in class. You will have to square up every board before you have a final product, right? And we can check that with using a square and other measurement devices to make sure that our end product will line up. So we're gonna get started using this machine, which is very simple. And we have two sets of tables on this one. We have the in-feed table and the out-feed table, right? So that means you always have to start on the in-feed table on this side. The on and off button is down below about knee height, right? And your dust collection system gate is right up here. So I'll pull that out and we can prepare to use it. We have a couple things. We have the guard here. This is what the blade looks like inside. So if I spin this really quick, you can see the blade runs the length of the table. And of course, we have the fence that goes over top of the blade, and we can adjust this fence. We can pull it out. We could move it, back in. And that helps us guide our board and keep it straight and flat across our in-feed and out-feed, right? This in-feed table has a set dimension. So down here you can see depth of cut. We keep it at right around a 1/16 of an inch. You can change that, but we usually do not. We usually just leave it at a 1/16 of an inch. So that means that every time you push your board from the in-feed table to the out-feed table, you're removing 1/16 of an inch, right? So this out-feed table is up higher by a 1/16 of an inch than this table, meaning that that blade right there will only remove the difference between this table and that table. So this guard is always in place. It's on a spring and it snaps back whenever you need it. These over here are called push sticks or push blocks. We have push blocks in order to, anytime your hands get close to the cutter head or your board is significantly lower than your fence, you want to use those push blocks on the top of your board to keep your hands, and I'll demonstrate that, to keep your hands away from the cutter head. You generally want to push this through in a smooth motion and make sure that you're not wiggling the board up and down, because then that's how you get uneven cuts. So one smooth motion, you're going to walk with your board, especially a longer one. You're going to walk with it and walk from the in-feed to the out-feed. You don't just stand here and move it over, right? Because you don't want to be leaning over top of that blade, right? So I'm going to demo this really quick, and then we can talk about some specifics. So whenever you're ready to use the machine, you're going to determine which edge you want to square up first. If your board looks better on one side and will require less passes, you should probably choose that one instead. Obviously, you want to look at different significant features. So this is just pallet wood. It's pretty beat up. But you want to make sure, like, do you want to remove something from the opposite side? Then maybe you want to consider doing, the side you want to keep, right? So whenever you're ready, you spin it up using the green button, right, the on and off. You use the green button to turn it on. This machine is very loud. You can hear the bearings spin up, so you won't be able to hear me as I talk kind of over the machine. All right, so I'm going to hit the start button. Let it spin up to full speed. 2 hands on the board. I'm going to walk it through. Let that stop. As it's spinning down, you can see it shoots out a lot of additional chips and stuff like that. And the way that we check to see is we know this table's completely flat. We can use the table to double check and see, can you see any light going through our board? And then we can determine, did we officially or successfully square up our board? So I would say we're looking pretty good in those spots here. At least better than it was, and we can check that as we move forward to the next machines. You might need to send it through maybe one more time, right? And you obviously want to also check looking down the board, which you can see this board is not very straight at all, right? But you want to check to make sure there's no nicks, there's no giant chunks taken out from the blade, and this one I would say is good to go. We can move it on to the next machine. The joiner is also used as sort of like a planer, which is that machine over there we're going to do next. And your planer, or the planer motion, right, when using a joiner, is placing the board flat on its face like this. So you have the edge of the board and you have the face of the board, right? The face of the board is always what's showing the most wood grain there. And then you have, of course, the ends of your board. See, this is end grain. This is edge grain, this is face grain. So if you wanted to, you could run it through this way. You just need to use push blocks. Right, so you set your blocks here and here, and then you could remove material that way. Now it creates a ton of chips and a giant mess. We're better off just using the planer, because whenever we use this machine, you just send it through and it does all the work for you. You don't even have to walk it through, right? But if we didn't have one of those, we could do this, right? One thing to determine, you can have a piece of wood that's too small to go through here. If I wanted to run, a real small piece of wood in terms of length, right? Anything that's shorter than the width of this table is too small. So if you have an 8-inch planer, a jointer, an 8-inch joiner, you do not want to send your board through if it's smaller than 8 inches, right? So you'll see that on your safety test. If you have an 8-inch joiner, don't send something that is smaller than the length of the blade, right? So your length of the blade runs from here to here. All right, so again, if you wanted to face joint this board, you could. You have to use push blocks though. You can't just put your hands up here. Look how close you are to the blade, right? Especially with your thumb hanging down. All right, so that is the jointer, a very useful but easy machine to use. And we're gonna move on to the planer.